Hello friends, and welcome to the Southern Mountain Kitchen Christmas Cookie Collection video. In this video we're going to make 6 different kinds of cookies for you to have for the holidays, and there's going to be something I'm sure everybody will like. So Merry Christmas everyone. So to start with, you're going to need 2 cups of white sugar, which we're going to put in a large bowl. To this, you are going to add 1 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder and ½ cup of vegetable oil. And once you get this all in your bowl, we're going to mix this up a bit to get it mixed through before we add anything else to this. So go ahead and get a spatula and mix this around because you want to get this completely mixed through before we add anything like eggs to it. Now go ahead and add your eggs. You can add them 1 or 2 at a time and then start mixing them in just to make sure that we are breaking the eggs up properly in this. We don't want them staying solid. We want to break them up completely and keep mixing it through. And add your other eggs. So there are 4 eggs total in this. And as you mix this together, you're going to notice it's going to turn into a kind of solid mix here. It's not going to be overly wet. It will be kind of pasty, but that's what you want. So try to mix as much of this through as you can before you add your vanilla extract. So as you can see, you need to scrape the sides to this and keep turning it to mix it all together. And then once you get it most of the way there, you're going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Then in a separate bowl, we are going to add 2 cups of all-purpose flour and then 2 teaspoons of baking powder and ½ teaspoon of salt. And you want to mix this up because you want to make sure all of the salt and everything gets evenly distributed. And then we're going to take this and spoon it into the original mix that we did, about half of it at a time, and then try to mix it through because we want to make sure that we get it all mixed up. But it is a bit of a chore to get the flour mixed into the original mix. Somewhere along the line, you want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Unless your oven runs a little cold, you might want to go 360 on this. And these are going to cook once we get them in the oven for about 11 to 12 minutes. Something you might want to just check from time to time to see how they're cooking, but usually 12 minutes will do it. So in your bowl, you're still mixing here. Make sure you can get as much of that flour incorporated as possible before you put the rest in, because it'll just make it easier on you to mix it up if you do this. And scrape the sides as you go, because we want to make sure all of this pulls through. Now once you get the rest of the flour in, just go ahead as before, mix it in, get it completely mixed through to the point that it is completely looking like a chocolate mess, which kind of looks really rough until you get it completely mixed up. But once you get this completely done, it will kind of have this really thick pudding look to it, which that means you've gotten it all completely there. Now what you're going to do with this is spoon it out or scoop it out as I'm doing, with balls that are about like an inch or so wide, and you're going to roll them in confectioner sugar, which you should probably have at least 3/4 of a cup there. And then when they're done, you're going to put them onto a pan to go into the oven, which the pan can be lined with like parchment paper, or you can actually put a little butter underneath of it, like smooth it over with butter, so that way when you put your cookies onto it, they don't stick. Usually these will not. This will be a little bit of a mess though when you go to move this around, because you're gonna have powdered sugar all over a lot of stuff. But probably the parchment paper is the easier way to do it. But just remember, these are going to be in the oven around 350 degrees for 11 to 12 minutes. And just check them, because if your oven is running a little cooler than normal, you might need to add a minute or so to it to make sure they're done. And when they are finished, they look something like this, and they are wonderful to eat, and they won't last long. So we're going to start out in a medium to large size bowl, which we're going to add 2/3 cup of sugar and then 8 tablespoons of melted butter. Now you can either make this gloopy, melted completely, whichever is fine, as long as it's able to be mixed. And we're going to use a hand mixer on this and go ahead and mix the sugar and butter together to get it completely blended before we add anything else to this. This may take a moment, but go ahead and make sure you scrape the sides and the bottom to pull everything in. We want to get all of this incorporated together. During this time, you should be thinking about preheating your oven to 350 degrees, because these cookies are going to go in there for about 25 minutes, or until they're starting to get a little golden on the outside. So keep mixing your bowl to make sure you're getting everything pulled in. Now once you get this pretty mixed through, you're going to notice that it's going to be like a little fluffy, and that means you pretty much pulled everything together at that point. Just make sure that you don't have any clumps of anything on the side of your bowl that need to be mixed. Now, one reason why you want to take your time when you're mixing this and get it really fluffy is we want these cookies to be kind of soft and fluffy when they bake up. The more time you spend on mixing, the better, because it's going to make it a better blend of everything going in. Now, once you got it pretty much completely mixed through, you're going to add an egg to this and then go back and mix it again. Now, once you get your egg mixed into it, you might want to go ahead and scrape the sides with a spatula just to pull everything down to the bottom to make sure you haven't thrown anything to the side. We want to use every bit of this that we can, so bring it down into it. And go ahead and continue mixing. We want this to be really thorough and mixed. To this, you are going to add at least 3 tablespoons of milk, and that's going to go in your bowl and continue to mix. I think the majority of the time when you're making these cookies, it's spending time with the mixer. So along the way, you're going to add at least a half teaspoon of salt, and then you're going to add 1 3/4 cups of flour to this. Now, I put my flour in a little bit at a time when I'm mixing it, just to make sure I don't throw it all over the counter. You can put it all in if you want to. If your bowl is big enough, you don't think it's going to throw outside of it, that's fine. But as I was mixing this, I basically just put it in as much as I felt I could deal with at a time without throwing it everywhere. And again, you're going to mix this until everything is pulled in and it's mixed thoroughly and you get everything off the side of your bowl. Just make sure that everything is coming up from the bottom as well, because sometimes things do get stuck into the bottom. And as you can see, I added the rest of my flour in just now, because mine was starting to mix through. Now, just a reminder, if you haven't done it already, preheat your oven to 350 degrees, because remember, 25 minutes on the bake time. Seems a little longer than a normal cookie, but with the way that these are cooking up, it's perfectly fine. This is about what it needs. So as you can see in my bowl, everything is starting to thicken up, which is good. That's what you want with a cookie dough anyway. Go ahead and scrape your sides as you're going. Make sure you get everything off of there, because I had quite a bit of flour on the side of mine, so it's probably best to do this periodically to make sure you don't leave too much debris. Now, in a bowl, you're going to have a whole bunch of kisses. Mine are Hershey Kisses. You can get generic, you can get whatever you want. And then we're going to go ahead and take some of the dough, a spoonful or so at a time. Take it, roll it in sugar, and then we're going to sit it onto the pan and do our thumbprint, which we're going to push down ahead of time. We're not putting the chocolate kisses into this yet. We want to actually do that after they've been in the oven and cooked thoroughly through, because otherwise your kisses are likely to melt, and we don't want that to happen. So we're going to go ahead and put the whole pan of these out, and then go start putting the kisses on one at a time after it's baked. So these ones you're seeing on your screen have come out of the oven. They've already done their time there, and now the kisses are going on top. And you're going to let them sit and cool, and basically that's your cookie. And when it's done, it looks something like this. And these are really tasty, and they make a great snack for the holidays or for whenever. This is an amazing cookie that has a great taste for something that's really easy to make. So let's get going. 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour are going to go into your mixing bowl first. And to this we're adding 1/2 cup, which is 1 stick of butter that's softened. Go ahead and mix that up a bit. To that you are going to add 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract and stir that in as you're going. Next you're going to add 1/8 teaspoon of salt. And then you need 1/3 cup of confectioner's sugar. Once you get all of this into your bowl, you need to mix it through to make sure everything is incorporated. Make sure as you're stirring this up that you scrape the sides and make everything pull in. You don't want to waste anything that's stuck to the side of it, but you also want to make sure that all your ingredients are mixed through. To this, you are going to add 1/2 cup of chocolate chips and 1/2 cup of chopped pecans. And now that they're in, you want to mix those through with the cookie dough mix that you've already put together. The good thing about this is there's very few ingredients, but it mixes up to a really great tasting cookie, which could be served for the holidays, Christmas, whatever. It just has one of those tastes that, you know, you want to keep eating it because it's just that flavorful with the chocolate chips and the pecans. So take a non-stick cookie sheet, make sure that if it is sticky a little bit that you do spray it with some non-stick cooking spray, because I found even though it says non-stick, it doesn't always mean a lot. When you go to put the dough on, you're going to basically want to use small balls worth of this, to the point where it's like you take a regular tablespoon and just scoop a little bit of it on and roll it into a ball. It doesn't matter how large you make it, it's your choice. I would say just roll them to medium to small balls, because when you put them on your pan, you're going to want them to stay in ball form, because as it cooks, it's going to kind of hold the shape of the ball a bit. At this time, you need to preheat your oven to at least 350 degrees, depending on how your oven runs temperature-wise. Some ovens run lower, so you might need to go up slightly. We're not trying to put these in a way to where they're going to get really browned. You do not want to brown them. You just want to put them in for at least 12 to 13, 14 minutes to make sure they're cooked through. But browning is bad because that'll make it a little too crunchy. We want these to stay kind of soft. So as you're going through, just continue as you do until you fill up your cookie pan. I ended up having to use 2 different pans to do it because I had that many cookies come out of this, and it doesn't really look like a lot. At the end, you probably have about 18 cookies, but I leave room between them just in case if it comes to a point where it cooks down a little bit and spreads out. You don't want them sticking together. Most of the time with these, they always stay in the ball form. And that's what you want it to do. Now, if in the beginning when you mixed up your mixture and it seemed a little too wet or too whatever, you could always put it in the fridge before you go to put them onto the cookie pan, because if you chill it, it's going to make it a little bit more rigid and easier to deal with. I didn't have to because mine was ready to roll, but that doesn't mean that's always going to be the case. The good thing about this is with this dough, it usually is pretty easy to make it stick together to form the ball. And then when you get them all separated out on your pan and put them through the oven and come back with it, this is what it's going to look like. They don't look browned, but then you're going to take some powdered sugar and sprinkle over top of them to make sure that you coat them really well, because the powdered sugar on the outside gives it such a good taste because it really sweetens it up. And just shake it over top of all of these. And the best thing is when you go to store these, you can put them in a container with a little wax paper and still sprinkle more of the sugar on top if you need when you're ready to serve them. And this is what you get when you're done. Some amazing cookies, which are great for a party, holidays, whatever, or just for eating anytime. So to start off with, you're going to preheat your oven to 350 degrees because these are going to be in there for about 12 minutes to cook. And then in a large bowl, we are going to mix together 3/4 cup of melted butter and then 1/4 cup of shortening. You can soften this up a little bit by heating it a bit in the microwave. In the end, if it's still kind of lumpy when it's in your mix, it's okay. It will cook in. And then to this, we are going to add 3/4 cup of brown sugar and then 3/4 cup of regular sugar. And we're going to use a whisk and mix this all together and get all of it incorporated before we add anything else too. Now, as I said before, this may be a little lumpy because when you're mixing in shortening, sometimes it doesn't blend so well. It's a little lumpy. It's okay. It will blend through by the end and it will cook into the cookies. Now, once we get this pretty mixed up, we're going to go ahead and add 2 eggs to it. And go ahead and break up those egg yolks and get them mixed in. As you're going, make sure that you're using your spatula or your whisk to go around the edges to get whatever might be stuck to that. And then we are going to add in a teaspoon of vanilla. You can add a little extra vanilla if you want. It might give it a little bit more flavor. It's your choice on how much you like vanilla in your mix. And go ahead and mix this up really thoroughly. Make sure you get it as incorporated as you can before we get to any of the other stuff. And then we are going to add in our flour, which is 2 1/4 cups of flour. And we're going to go ahead and try to mix this into the wet ingredients before we add anything else, just to try to mix it in without making a mess of it. Once you get that pretty much mixed, then you're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to go ahead and continue to mix this until all the flour is incorporated, all the other ingredients are mixed together, and you get a really decent mix of everything in the bowl. Now, once we get this all mixed together, it's going to go in the refrigerator for half an hour to an hour to set up, because we want to thicken it a little bit before we actually bake the cookies. So once this is all mixed up and we are about ready to do the last of the incorporating, we're going to add in 2 cups of chocolate chips, which is basically about a package. So go ahead and dump them in, because once these are in, we're going to just fold them in a little bit and stick this in the fridge. So if you haven't done it already, you need to preheat your oven to 350 degrees, because like I said, it takes about 12 minutes for these to bake because they're going to be thicker cookies. We're going to make a mound of chocolate chip cookie dough here to sit and kind of spread out a little bit, but it's going to hold its shape and be thicker. And that's what we're trying to go for, is a really thick cookie. But like I said, once this is completely mixed in, they are going to go into the refrigerator, and it's going to sit for 30 minutes to an hour depending on how long you want to do it. Then when we come back, we're going to take a baking pan, line it with parchment paper, and we're going to take a scoop and literally just get a really decent sized scoop of cookie dough and put on it. And you're going to want to space these out because they will spread a little bit, but they're also going to be thick. So I would leave about 3 inches or so between the cookies, so that way, you know, if they do spread out, they don't hit each other. And you're probably going to have to do a few different pans because they are so spread out, but these do turn out to be really decently large cookies. And once you've gotten them all on the pan, you put it in the oven, and when it comes back, it's going to look something like this, and these are amazing to eat. So everything you see on the counter is what we're going to use to make these cookies. And I have to admit, I'm not a fan of molasses cookies, or at least maybe I wasn't until I made this, because this recipe is actually quite good. The ones from the store weren't impressing me, but this did. And I had a family member who wanted some, so I went ahead and made this version at home, and I was pleasantly surprised. So what we're going to do is take a large mixing bowl, add 1/3 cup of granulated sugar to it, 1/3 cup of brown sugar. I use light, you can use dark on this. And then we're going to add into this 1/2 cup of unsalted butter at room temperature, or at least something close to it. We just want to make sure it's not hard from the refrigerator. And then we're going to mix this up with our mixer. Somewhere about this time, if you want to go ahead and preheat your oven to 350 degrees, go ahead and do it, because these are going to be in there for at least maybe 12 minutes or so. It's kind of one of those things you want to check as you go along. The consistency that this makes is really wonderful for their soft cookies. So, you know, you kind of want to watch it, you don't over bake them. So we're going to use our mixer here, keep going around from side to side all the way across the bottom, and make sure if there are any large hunks of butter that we're breaking them up before we add anything else, because pretty soon we're going to add some vanilla and some molasses to this. So go ahead and keep going with it, because I'm going to say the mixing time on this should be almost 2 minutes just to get it broken up. That way you don't really miss a lot of the larger pieces. Now, when we're adding in the next ingredients, we have 1 teaspoon of vanilla and 1/3 cup of unsulfured molasses. You need to make sure it says unsulfured molasses, because the other version has a harsh taste to it. We want this version just maybe for the taste of it, it tastes better, but you don't want that harshness of the other version of molasses. So go ahead and get all of it out of your bowl. It will take a second because, you know, the stuff sticks to things. And once we get it in, we're going to mix again and make sure that this goes all the way through the butter and the sugars and it's completely incorporated. And once we get it done, this is pretty much all that's going to be done in this bowl for the time, because we're going to start a new bowl to do some dry ingredients in just a minute. So go ahead and mix until you see that everything in your bowl is pretty much pulled in from the sides and everything. If you need to scrape them, and just mix it up really well. Because as you're doing this, you're going to notice it's going to mix through quite nicely. It's just going to take a second to pull in all the butter and everything to make sure it's totally incorporated. Now, in another bowl, we're going to start out with 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/2 teaspoon of salt. You can use fine salt if you want to. 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger, and then 1/2 teaspoon of cardamom. When I went to make this, I went to the store trying to find cardamom, and you know, this is not an easy thing to find, but if you keep looking, you will get it. Just watch the price on it. So we're going to whisk this together in our bowl to make sure that all of the flavors mix in with the flour, and we don't have any of the ginger in one's place or not really mixed through. Then we're going to take this and mix half of it into the wet mixture that we had before, and we're going to go ahead and just stir this around. The best thing about this is putting it at half at a time. It's easier to mix through, because once you mix in the half that we already put in there, then it's going to be all into the wet mixture before more dry hits it, and then you got like piles of flour you're trying to mix in. So go ahead and stir this until you see that the flour has disappeared. One clue that you got it pretty much there is you're not going to see streaks of flour when you're stirring around with your spoon. Especially when we get to adding all of the other dry into it. You really want to make sure there's no flour hanging about here or there. Now, if you see the little red container at the bottom of my screen, that is water. Because if you mix this up and it just somehow comes out a little on the dry side, you can add like a tablespoon of water to it to make it more moist. Mine, I didn't have a problem with. It literally just mixed straight together, but I had it there just in case I needed it, because better to have it, not need it. You know what I mean? So again, with the whole idea of mixing this, make sure that you don't have any ribbons of white showing through when you get this completely mixed together. Just keep rolling it around in there, mixing it up, pulling it from the sides, and make sure we get everything from the sides inside of it. And then it eventually is just going to become a ball of all the same color. So once it's all mixed up, we're going to take about 1/3 of a cup of sugar, put it on a plate or something. I just used a paper plate so I could dispose of it when I was done. And we're going to use a cookie scoop and scoop this out in balls, which these are, I guess, about a medium-sized cookie scoop. And then just roll it around in the sugar till all the sides are coated. Because we're going to do this with a bunch of these before we start putting them onto our baking pan. And when you cook these up, you should get around 16 cookies, and they're going to be pretty large. Then you're going to get your baking pan ready, and then line it with some parchment paper. It's the best way, easy cleanup. Put your cookie ball down onto it and just push it down a little bit. So that way when these cook, they cook out instead of staying in a mound. And just do this for all of these you have. I had to do 2 large pans to get all of mine done because I spaced them out because, like I said, they do spread out a bit. And like I said, if you haven't done it already, we want that temperature at about 350, and we're going to cook these for about 12 minutes until they're completely done. And once you get all of these onto your pan, then you can put them in. Now you could actually put 2 pans in the oven at the same time and rotate them. But when they're done, they look something like this. And I have to tell you, I was really impressed with the taste of this. I didn't think I would like it that much because of the molasses, but these are really a treat. These cookies are a very easy recipe, but they're great and they taste wonderful when they come out. It's just one of those things where once you have it the first time, you're going to want more. So we're going to start off with granulated sugar, 3/4 of a cup, 3/4 of a cup of packed brown sugar. And as you can see, I'm putting these in 2 different containers at a time. It's a little confusing, but to this, you're going to add 1 cup of margarine that's been softened. To that, we're adding 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And then we're going to add 1 egg. When you mix this together, you need to make sure that everything is combined between the sugars, the butter, the egg. You want everything to really pull together into a nice paste. You don't want any lumps of anything left over because otherwise it will not mix to your cookie very well. Probably only takes a couple minutes to actually mix all of this through, but once it's mixed through, at least you know you're not going to have lumps in your cookies. Now, as you can see in my bowl, everything is pretty much blended together to one color. There's not any brown sugar sticking out or anything that makes it look like it's not mixed. Once you're finished mixing this up, you're going to move over to the next bowl, which actually has 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour in it. To that, we're adding 1 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And you want to mix this through at this point to make sure that your baking soda and your salt and everything gets distributed throughout the flour. You don't want any places where there's more than there should be. Now you're going to take your original bowl that you started with and pour this into the flour. And make sure you scrape your bowl because you want every bit of everything in the bowl into the flour. Now once you have it in, go ahead and start mixing it up. You don't have to be totally thorough with this yet, but get as much of it mixed up as possible because we're still going to add more to this, but we want to try to get it incorporated a bit. Make sure that if you have flour that's around the side that you keep going and bring that into the center so it mixes through with the wet mixture. Now we're going to add more too. So you're going to start with a bag of chocolate chips, which is basically a package is about 11.5, 12 ounces depending on the kind you get. I added 1/4 of a cup of Belgian chocolate, which has been cut into pieces, and then a cup of chopped walnuts. Now once this is in, you want to continue mixing it into your other bowl. Because this has to be distributed, you want to make sure all of the chocolate, the nuts, and everything gets mixed in with your original mix you had in the bowl. So it's going to take a minute. If there's any extra flour you see coming up from the bottom, keep mixing until the flour is incorporated. You don't want large amounts of flour turning up later when you're scraping the bottom of the bowl. This may take a few minutes to do, and this mixture is going to be stiff because when you get it all combined into the dough, you do want it to be a little stiff so that way your cookies have a little bit of lift to them when they're baking and they don't go flat. Because these cookies, when I make them, turn out to be soft, and it's really great because when you bite into them you have a soft cookie, but you also have like nuts and 2 kinds of chocolate, and it has a lot of flavor, and it's something that you enjoy eating. And when I made these, I made an incredible amount of them. This bowl, depending on how big you make your cookies, could make, I had 3 pans worth of cookies, so I mean it's quite a lot. Spray your pan that you're going to be putting them onto. You know, everything says it's non-stick until you cook and find out it's not. I found that one out the hard way. And then just take a couple of spoons, unless you have something like, you know, a scoop, and just pull it out into balls and put it onto the baking pan. I line these about 3 per row, and then I got, you know, several rows out of it. I just wanted to give them a little room to cook so they didn't end up baking out, cooking together and being, you know, one big cookie. And this seemed to work quite well for me. And these were decent sized cookies by the time I was done, so. But at this time you need to be preheating your oven to about 350, 360 degrees. These take about 8 to 10 minutes to cook depending on your oven, because I've said this before, everybody's oven is different, and temperatures, even though it says it's 350, might not necessarily be. I use a thermometer to check mine because mine always cooks lower than it should, and I have to turn the temperature up. It's always better to be safe than sorry, because if you take all the time to mix this up, you really don't want to ruin it by an oven that's not the right temperature. So as you can see, this cookie dough is really easy to work with. It's not a problem getting it onto the pans. It's not terribly messy, which it's a quick and easy thing. And when you're done, this is what the cookies look like. And like I said, they are wonderful to eat. So I hope you enjoy these as much as I do, because they are a great recipe. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe. And if you get a chance, check out my cookbooks, which are available in bookstores worldwide. The first is about everyday cooking. The second is all about baking. Merry Christmas, everyone.